All right, here's the 426 update. I'm going to try and go through this as quickly as possible, just do some high-level changes that have happened, and then maybe do some focus videos on more specific topics. So let's get rolling. The first thing that you'll want to do is go and enable the plugins. So you search for DMX. You'll notice now they're in beta, no longer experimental. However, there was a big change between 25 and 26. So you will probably want to just start a new project because there's not a really good way to upgrade and it'll probably just cause more problems. So I would start a brand new project. Enable all of them. We have a new pixel mapping feature, which I probably won't cover at all in this one, but it is there. So once you restart, you will get this nifty little DMX icon. But before we dive into that, just want to go over a couple settings in the project settings. Now we have a drop down for IPs, so you can pick which NIC you have. I'm just going to go with the primary. You still have your offsets, you have categories, there's a new section for attributes, which I'll talk about. Then there's also refresh and send rates, and then these send and receive by default will actually, what they'll do is in standalone or in a build, they will override what you've done here. So that way, if you accidentally have this paused and you go standalone, it will override it, which is usually what you want. So, but that's what those checkboxes do. So now that we have this icon here, the other thing, we've decoupled the monitoring part, so now you can actually look at a channel monitor without having it to be bound to an asset, which is pretty nice. Other than that, it works the same way. There's a new window, which is the activity monitor, which any patch universe that you have, it will show here. You can cap it with ranges and things like this, but I actually kind of like this one because it gives me just a better overall picture of like what's going on. And then there's some updates to the output console, which it's much nicer and easier to use. But we're going to talk about input mostly today. So same thing as before. I have my magic cue kind of show already set up. I have a Sharpie, a strobe, a fake Cupix, I think, and some LED par basically. And I'll try and bring that over when I do something with it. So we will right click, go to DMX, add a DMX library, DMX example 1, and open it up. And it's a fairly familiar looking window, but when you're in controllers, add a new controller, you'll notice you may get this little warning, which is pretty handy. It's telling you that you already have some libraries that have these same addresses. And there's still not really a clear, I guess, way of merging or doing things with different libraries that overlap. So it's just a little nice handy thing to let you know, hey, you might want to check that out. So I'm actually just going to use a couple of universes. I use ArtNet because it just seems to work really simply in broadcast, and that's good to go on these settings. You can change it to unicast now and add IPs and things like this, but I just leave it broadcast, easy enough. When we go to the fixture type window, we're going to add a new type. We're going to go with our beamy light again this time. And I'm going to go just do the same thing I did before with importing. So when I go now and pick my GTF file, you have to already have these in your project, right? Like I had already brought them in. They're in here right here. They don't ship with the engine. You have to get them from gtf-share.com. And I'm going to use this clay package Sharpie, and you notice like it kind of auto-populates, and that's a good thing. That's what we want to have happen. I'm going to change the category, just make it a moving head, and you'll see you get your two modes. So I got standard and vector. I'm going with standard in this case. And you'll see now that we have kind of two columns here. We have functions and attributes. Now, attributes are what we're going to use internally inside the engine for anything that we're doing. So if you're doing blueprint work, you no longer have to use like finds and things like this for functions. Like you have a defined set of attributes, and these attributes are specified in this project settings. We give you this default set, and basically you have a name, and then you have a keyword. So the keywords are just to kind of try and help auto-populate this stuff if you're importing. So basically anything that in there just separated with commas and spaces. So if I can put another one in here and just say I wanted, color as well in case it was actually named color, right? And so then if you import, if you're using this DMX import, it will automatically match for you, which is pretty handy. And in this case, I'm actually going to use it. Sharpies don't have zoom, but I want to show off what zoom does. So I'm going to remap focus. So if I move focus on my camsys, it will now adjust zoom internally. And then you still have the same function properties down here that you did before. So you can pick whether it's 8 or 16-bit or whatever it is. You can change the least significant, and there's a default value, which I think currently doesn't work, but it will work. The next thing we'll do is I'll create a couple more different types just to get going. So I'll do an RGB plus dimmer, or I guess whatever, we'll call this LED par, right? And I'm not going to do a import this time. It's a static fixture, it's fine. And then my mode, I'll actually name it RGB dimmer. And this time I'm just going to create it from scratch, right? So really the only portion of this that matters for me for internally is this attribute section. However, just for the sake of clarity, I'm going to go ahead and type these in just because it looks nicer. But internally, everything's going to be using attributes. These functions are really just mostly for importing and for remapping, things like that. So we're good. We got this. We're good to go there. We had, what did I have? I also had a strobe and a Cupix panel. So this is brand new. I'm gonna, again, I just picked the Cupix kind of at random here, but we have the ability to kind of deal with matrix fixtures and cells now. So even if you were to change this to matrix, this is just categorically, you actually have to tell it, hey, this is a matrix here with this checkbox. And when you do this, now when I go into mode, I get a slightly different window setup than if I'm not in a matrix section, right? So here I'm going to name this one just RGB, which is all that they are. And then I kind of get this option for what do I want the first cell to be, how many cells is it? So in this case, it's a 5 by 5. What's the sorting order? So start, all the possible combinations there. Then I'm going to specify what my cell attributes are here. So in this case, I'm going to tell it that these are red, green, and blue, right? So we're going to go red, green, and blue. And right now, importing doesn't do matrices on its own, so that's why there's no functions in this case here. And so then you'll see over here I have 75 channels of red, green, blue. Now, if, for instance, this particular fixture had a master dimmer, I can add that. I can say, okay, this is a dimmer channel. And right now it's telling me, hey, you have a problem. That's because I told this the first cell is 1, and this thinks this is 1. So one of two things have to happen. Either I have to move this one, right? So I need to put this on channel 76 or something like that. Or alternatively, I could move this one to start at channel 2, right? So it depends on whether these master functions are in the front or in the back. In this case, for this fixture, there aren't any. But if you were trying to create something like a magic panel and you need a pan tilt, this is how you would do that. You would add the functions into the front of where all the cells are, because that's how they are. Let me see how we are on time. Okay, good. So we have these 3 examples, and we'll throw them in the scene and see how they work. But before that, we're going to the patch, right? And we're actually going to patch these things. So I know that I have in mind, I have 2 of these beamy lights. So again, same kind of thing. I'll name it, and so that way if I duplicate it, it will just increment properly. But now we have this nice little visual over here, and you can move these around. When you do that, of course, it disables auto assign. But you are free to do this. You can change the colors. So that's actually pretty nice. And I don't think you can multi-select yet, but really, really cool that this is a nice little visual reference here for you. Let me just double check my patch screen. I had a strobe at 33. Okay, so I didn't pick a strobe on this one. And then I have my cubics panel, so I'll put this guy in here and I will just remember it. I only have one, so it doesn't really matter. And then I'll take off auto assign and I put this one at 101 just to make it nice, but again, I could have just drug it around if I want. And then I also have 10 of these LED bars patched, and I put them in universe 2. So one thing to note, if you swap universes, like it doesn't necessarily know like, hey, should I restack this or not? So if you toggle it off and toggle it back on, it will restack it for you. It basically then does a search thing. So I can do just, again, I can, if I name this 1 and duplicate it, I can get my 10 of them really quickly. I can grab these and duplicate them again in here if I want to, and it will kind of keep going. So it just kind of depends on what we have, but this is all I have for right now. So we got our patch, everything's good, and let's go back to the level. So now inside the level, if you have engine and plugin content on, and you can see I already have data coming in, right, from my Magic Queue. So that's why there's stuff in here in the monitor. You'll have this DMX content, fixtures content, and inside here you'll see there's all kinds of neat things that we've given you now. There's water fountains, there's lasers, there's fireworks, pyro, there's some stage elements with some truss and barricades and some drape and stuff. And hopefully we'll keep adding to these, but we're going to deal with the light fixtures for now. So all the light fixtures now there's a DMX Actor class. Okay, so if I open this guy up, you'll see now inside of it there's not much here. There used to be all these blueprints and stuff, but now it's pretty basic. It's just going to get the patch, get the attributes, initialize, set up our interpolation step, and then when the patch is received, when data is received for this fixture only, so there's no more protocol receipt, or I think it's there, but we don't use it. We're going to get the values and push them in. So if you needed to make any modifications, like this is the place you would probably want to do it. Like for instance, if you wanted to change color from RGB to CMY, you do your math in here before it pushes the data. But this is kind of it. So when you create a blank DMX actor now, so I'll just go in here, and if I create a blueprint, I do DMX, yeah, this fixture actor, PP, right. You'll notice that the structure is there for you. The only difference is in ours, we've added the meshes and all the components that we want, but you could just as easily build your own this way. I'd probably recommend, at least in the beginning, just use this one and make alterations to it. However, an important thing to kind of think about is if you edit the things that are in here, these are in your engine content, so they will have, you'll edit it essentially for any project that's referencing it. So a good way to work with these is to actually create a child blueprint. So now I have basically an inherited copy, and I'm gonna move that to where I want it to be. And now I'm gonna use these, because now if I make any changes to these values, it's not gonna affect the base class. And so what I would recommend is for every type of light you are going to create, so in this case, really what I'm doing is this will be my beamy light. If I had whatever, BMFLs, and then I had Vipers, and I had other things, I would have one of these child classes per type of light that I have, so that way I can change the settings for it, for that group of fixtures. So I put this in the scene. You'll see now that we have some settings that are on it. The patch is actually on the base level now. You no longer have to actually go into the component. It's on the base level. So this really helps with just visibility. Let me minimize that a little bit so we get a little more space. And so we also have these settings for quality level. So it's a new beam shader that's actually a ray march technique. and so you can adjust the amount of samples. So this is really, really useful for, again, if you have fixtures that are far away, you don't want to eat into your performance, you can dial it down. Or if you're trying to record into DMX into Unreal, which is a whole nother topic, you could crank the quality down on record, and then if you're rendering out, crank the quality up to ultra. So I'm just going to go on ultra because it looks better. This is the max intensity of the light in approximately in lumens. The distance is the attenuation distance, color, and then the spot and intensity, spot and point intensities to kind of help you try and balance between how much light should it cast versus how much of the beam should we actually see. So for instance, like a wash light would actually throw more light on the ground, but you wouldn't see like a defined like beam cone, but like a Sharpie or something like that would be kind of the opposite. So these are to kind of help you tweak those. Then you can determine if you want to cast shadows or use occlusion. So I can pick the library here, no problem. So I can just say, here's my example, and I can pick my Beamy one, and that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And at that point, I'm pretty much done. So if I pop into simulate, and I'll get my console here, and right, have that go full, and like there we go. So I've at least got the thing going on. So I think it does look a little funny, and part of the reason for that I think is I have a post-process volume that I've been messing around with, and it's affecting some of the things on it. But in any case, that is basically all that I need to do to get this thing, working at least initially. So inside each one of these components, I'll just go over this really quickly. There's some settings for them, and again, like if you edit any, you can edit them individually on the fixture level, or you can, again, since we use a child blueprint class, we could just edit it on the child, right? And so any light that's using the same blueprint will be affected by these things. But I guess they all have, they have what they are. So there's nothing necessarily special about this dimmer component. It's just we've told it, hey, we're listening to dim. The logic is there for the dimmer to work, but we could tell it to listen to a different channel, I guess. So you have your min and max. What's the default value? Is it? You can just disable components. You can tell it if it's using matrix data, and then you can just the skip threshold is for, and interp is to try and help with DMX interpolation. So again, I'll throw it into play over here, or simulate in this case. If I go into full, that's fine, and not have it selected. And again, now we can, since I remapped it, I've got this nice, beautiful looking beam, and it's just a really, really solid looking feature right now, honestly. And so this is, the basics. Now you also have a lens material, so you can play with that as well. Some very, very other very cool things that we'll definitely, hopefully, like I said, get into in future videos. But so that's the basic for that guy. We're all, I'm happy. It does what I think it should do, and that's great. So the next thing that we'll look at is the other fixture types that we added. So super simple. Again, for the static head, it's the same kind of thing, but there's no pan and tilt components on it, right? That we're using. It actually has a zoom, strobe, and a dimmer. Like I'm not using all those, so here's again what I would recommend. I will delete this guy out of the level. I'm going to create a child blueprint class and move it into my actual project, right? And then I'll rename this guy. So I'm going to say this is my LED par. All right, and so now I'm going to make some edits to this. And because 50,000 is incredibly bright for something like this, right? So let's go with maybe like 10,000, right? And its distance, it's definitely not going to throw. Does that say 10,000? Yeah, it's definitely not going to throw as far. So let's go with maybe like 500, sure. And temp's fine. We'll leave all this stuff the same. So the other thing I'm going to look at is like I'm not using a strobe, right? So I can turn it off. Just one more thing I don't need. Right now the zoom, I think I'm going to leave it enabled because I want this default value to change. So right now it's going to be a really narrow beam. I'm going to widen that out and say it's got a 60-degree type lens on it, and I think I'll leave everything else alone. So you'll see there is a fourth channel here. We don't use it because we don't have the ability to, lights don't give us a color chart, so we don't know how much amber or white we would need to mix a color. If you have a light that has a calibrated mode, just use that. And if you find a light that has a chart, you could enable it and make it work. But that's why there's just not one there right now. So I can drag that into level, and this is great. And so since I had 10 of these, I'm just going to make a few copies. So I have those 5, and we'll go like that. So great. Now I have those 10 of them. I already released this somewhere, but I wrote this custom tool to help with patching. I'll try and put it somewhere where I have a link. It's actually in the Geodesic GitHub, but I had to make some changes to update it for 426, but so just to help me patch this a little bit quicker, I will go to my example 1, I'll go to my first one, and I'm going to address and rename them, and there we go. So now we're good to go. So all that does really is it's just like a recursive lookup that goes through and goes and increments them in order, and then renames them based on what they were in the patch. So we'll definitely push this out somewhere because it's super handy. And so then we're good on these guys. So again, if I hit play or simulate, in this case, I'll grab these things and put them in full and mix them in red. And now, since those were LED and they're using the color component, we can use the color mixing, and we get this nice kind of thing going here. And then I can also do my intensity since they have a dimmer channel. So super cool. So that's good. And the last but not least, of course, is this idea, the new one, the matrix fixture. So go back to this. I'm going to do the same thing I did before, create a child blueprint class. I'll just rename it first. So I'm going to call this QPix. And then I'm going to move that out of here and throw it, throw it in the demo folder. Yep. All right, so now I have this QPix one. So this one is slightly different. So when I drop it in, you'll notice there's nothing there. And the matrix fixture, the way it's designed from us, it's actually procedural. So it will generate the number of cells based on the patch. So it's important that your patch is accurate as far as like how many cells are in it and what they do. So again, it still has the same base components, but we also gave the ability to pan or tilt the individual cells. So for something like a star bar or rogues or whatever, there's various ones that do it. And then you can add different components to the matrix portions of it. So the way that actually works is first you want to tell it what it is. So I'm going to just tell it that you are my QPix. And then you'll specify the outer dimensions, so 50 and 50, and how deep is the unit. And then I generate preview mesh, and it's going to generate the mesh for me. And what's cool about this too is, again, probably another video, but if I actually open this up, there is a place where you can change the lens too. So you're not bound to our square lens. You can make it circle or whatever you want. You can put a little smiley face in there. It doesn't really matter. And so that's pretty much it. Again, you have the same kind of controls for it. And so I will, how's it? And right now there's something where they don't really go out all the way. It's something to do with like what we're using for like the flare effect of it. But if we grab the Q-Pix, start full, there we go. Very, very cool. If I grab it and someone wants to help me be a better Magic Cube programmer, hit me up. And there we go. So now we have the same kind of thing with the uh, matrix where we can do the chase internally inside of it. So pretty cool stuff. And you'll notice it's kind of hard to see, but it's actually doing like a little something on the ground here as well. It's doing like a kind of an averaging, so you're not going to notice like a ton of movement from something like this, but you will notice a difference between, say, if you have, them all at full, and versus, and I can see it like, doing something with the color chase in it. So it's, yeah, that's kind of the basics for those things. There's a couple of other types in there, but I think this zone is way longer than the other one, so we're gonna cut it off there, and then maybe we'll do another one that has pixel mapping, DMX recording, how to edit the fixtures. There's a whole slew of other topics that we'd love to get to, but hopefully this will get you started for now. And then definitely come back to the mega thread that we started in the forum, and let us know kind of what's going on, what you're seeing, and what you guys think. All right, see ya.